Doesn't matter. You guys inverted pyramid to show us how we write a story. So what you do is you go out on jobs, we call them jobs, and we go out on jobs sometimes with your photographer, sometimes if you work for a community paper, which is what I was, you go out by yourself with your own small camera that's worth $15 rather than $15,000. And so what you do is you talk to the people and you have in your mind before you go kind of what the story's going to be like and the questions that you're going to need to ask them. So say if I was going to be interviewing Robin about her job as the chief reporter of the Southland Times, I'd ask a lot of the same questions that you guys ask. So I'd ask her things like, you know, how'd you get into the job, and what made you decide to be a photographer, and what's your favourite part. But you've also got to really think, what does the reader want to know, and what's going to make this...
It's a better pen.
Thank you. What is going to make the reader really read this whole story and be interested in this whole story? Because you could write a story and be like, Robin Eadie takes photos for the Southland Times, she likes it. Sometimes she takes pictures of the All Blacks. And that's boring, but if you say, you know, Robin Eadie is whizzing on the back of a bike in the driving rain and the, you know, and the tour of Southland, but she loves it, you know, that's going to really excite your reader, because your job, as much as Robin's, is to paint a picture but inside someone's head so that they become completely engaged. So you've got to really think about the kind of questions that you ask. And what we do is we talk, I go backwards and forwards. I have to write everything down because that's why I'm a reporter and not a public speaker. We use a principle called the 5 W's and an H, which is so snappy. Does anyone know what that is? You all know.
Every hand should be up.
Yeah. Everyone tell me. Tell me, just all W words. Water. I can't. Okay, so the 5 W's and H, you always keep that in your mind when you're writing a news story. All of this information needs to be in what we call our intro. Does anyone know what an intro is? Yeah? Yeah?
The starting paragraph that like states all.
Yeah, if you've ever written an essay, it's almost like your statement of intent in the beginning of an essay, but not quite, because what you also need to do is hook your reader with something really awesome and interesting. So, you know, and a news story about something really important and kind of boring about, you know, policy and parliamentary things, you probably would just say, you know, John Key today said we have no money left and we're all going to have to start working in a fish and chip shop. But if it was a fun story about, you know, different things, or, you know, you can sometimes change things around to make them sound different. Anyway, so we need to have all of this information, well, as much as you can squeeze in without it sounding ridiculous, because you don't want your sentence to be like 150 words long. But you have your basic main part of your information in there. So basically what's happened, where it is, why, sort of, you know what I mean, and how it happened in your first one. So there was police and fire appliances attended a fire on King Street yesterday. That's probably what we need. Then in your next paragraph, you expand that information. The fire was caused by a reporter talking too fast and too long, and she internally combusted. And then on your next, it would be, she had a history of going on fire, and police said that we weren't surprised. And then in the next bit, you go into even more detail and you talk to the policeman, and the policeman said that there was fire and it was terrible and people were screaming. So that's what happens with your inverted pyramid. So you have your basic information at the top, but the most important things, and then as you go down in the story, so at the very end, you put the stuff that's not particularly massively pertinent to the story, but there's still kind of important information. So say what I was wearing wouldn't be at the top unless it was important, unless my clothes caused the fire, in which case they'd be at the top, but the fact that I'm wearing a smart grey frock could probably stay at the bottom. Do you kind of understand what I mean? You can sort of see why I'm not a teacher, because I'm not very good at explaining things to people. Alright, so keeping in mind your 5 W's and H, and when you go to write your story, your inverted pyramid, you can sort of see that when you're doing your interviews, you need to structure them. So you need to have questions written down, and like I was saying before, you need to think outside the box when you talk about questions that you want to ask, because all the time you're going to be thinking about painting that picture. And as far as that's concerned, you also have to keep your eyes open all the time for the small details that are going to make your story go from boring John Key fish and chip shop story to, you know, something really interesting, and your reader is completely completely in that world and really understands all the things you're saying. And that's important for features as well. Who knows the difference between a news story and a feature? Anyone? No? Well, a news story is a story that is about the news, about things that are happening right now, and it gives you guys the information that you need to make decisions in your life and to be part of society. A feature can be on something that's awesome that's happening, like maybe a circus coming to town and we want to talk to some of the performers, or it can be taking a more in-depth look at a news story. So maybe John Keane, why he's actually fixated on fish and chip shops and not on dairies. So, so that would be a story that you do a feature. And in a feature, you get to use more interesting language, because in a news story, you need to keep your language kind of basic. You don't reach for your $15 words in a news story. You use language that everybody's going to understand. But in a feature, you can kind of be a bit more playful and really stretch your legs a little bit. And that's why a lot of reporters really love writing features. And then that you look for small details. So you look at, say, the fish and think, the fish isn't looking very well today. And that could be sort of part of your story. Oh, the fish was sad. It was because the reporter was being very boring and the fish fell asleep.
He doesn't look too happy, does he?
Breaking news.
He's watching it. He's enthralled.
He is.
He's enthralled.
Sorry, you'll asleep, won't you? Or asleep. Okay, so does anyone have questions about news stories and how to write your stories? Do you all know who you're talking to for your stories that you're writing to for your paper?
Audience. Who's your audience?
School.
People won't read it.
Parents.
I don't think it'll be New Zealand.
It could be. It's on the internet. Everything's for everyone now.
I go to New Zealand's Got Talent.
So, okay, so who, just have a quick think, who do you think some people would be that you'd be talking to for your paper?
Raise your hands.
Yes?
People that buy the newspaper.
That you're going to talk to them?
I don't know.
They're your audience, so you just tell them what they need to read. Well,
Yeah.
yep, the principal. Okay, so what kind of story do you think you'd be doing about the principal?
How he manages the school.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well see, there you go, that's your angle. How the school's managed and how, so not just a story about like, oh, the principal, but how does it all work behind the scenes, the stuff you guys don't know about, the things that you maybe take for granted, like who pays for the power, who makes sure that, it's warm in here, who makes sure that everyone does their jobs. Yep.
The teachers.
The teachers, so what kind of an angle would you go for talking about teachers?
What they're going to be doing, maybe like how they feel about some of the things they have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be talking about the Waitiri, how the teachers felt the students behave.
Mm-hmm. That's a news story. Bad behaviour on a Waitiri trip would be a definite news story. You can find out what your teachers are doing on their school holidays, what they do when they're not teachers. I mean, that's a scoop right there. Yes?
Local people.
Local people, like people that work in the area kind of thing. Yep, and you can talk to them. So you always have to sort of try and bring back the news to the people that you're reading to. So we talk to the people at the dairy and how having the school so close is great for the lolly business. Yes?
Students.
Students, and what kind of things would you talk to the students about?
What they like about the school.
Mm-hmm.
And how they what they think about the teachers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because in a newspaper, I'm not saying this is what you guys should do, but in a newspaper, what we need to make sure we do is we have balance. So when we're talking to the students about how they feel about the school, we would want some pupils to be telling us that they have a really great time and they love it and lunch is their favourite part. But for your story to be balanced, you also need to talk to the students that don't like being here and they hate it and they don't want to be here, and you need to talk to them about why. And that means your story is balanced. And it also makes it more interesting, because sometimes you just don't want to listen to people saying everything's awesome all the time. You need the guts and the interesting bit, and that's people often when they're mad or if they're not having a very good time doing what they're doing. Yep. Yes.
Parents.
Parents, what would you ask parents?
How well do you think the kids are doing in school?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. Yep.
It looks like at times do you ask the police or something.
Yes, that's very important. You do talk to the police, you talk to the fire people, we talk to comms, which you ring them and say, what's happening? And they say, nothing. You say, oh well. But then sometimes you get calls and you know that there's been a big fire and you run out with Robin and takes the picture and we help fill in the information. Okay, any more questions about how we write stories? because I haven't been very clear, I'm afraid. Yes?
How long, like, should a news thing be? Like, what's a good read?
Well, in a newspaper, I'll just get my legs up.